Hi everybody, Tim Hughes here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. With me today I've got Tony Boobier, and what we're going to do is we're going to talk about AI and the basics of AI. So we're not going to get into a lot of technical detail, but what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some of the things about how you as an individual can get ready for artificial intelligence. Before we get into that, Tony, can you tell everybody where they can get hold of you?
Well, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Tony Boobier. You can pretty well find me on email or on LinkedIn or on the internet or through Amazon. With a surname like mine, I'm fairly easily contactable. Feel free always to reach out, both on the basis of this particular interview, but maybe anything else which you're just interested in sharing a thought about.
And you are pretty active on social. So I mean, we met on LinkedIn, didn't we? So.
Well, that's right. Oddly enough, I got into the whole social media agenda, when a manager of mine, probably about a decade ago, set it as being one of my personal performance measures. You must become digital. And I didn't really understand.
It's exactly the same with me, actually, Tony. It was exactly the same with me, yes.
And I didn't really understand what that meant. And now, through events like this, but through blogging and through every opportunity, I just really take the chance to get out there and offer a point of view, and really hope to create a conversation.
And you've got an interesting background in so much as that you've worked insurance, you've got a data background, you've worked with IBM, and so you've got a kind of a tech but also a business background. Hence your movement towards the artificial intelligence.
My original qualification, oddly enough, was as a structural engineer.
Yeah.
And at university, they taught me how to build things, but I was more interested in how they fell down and why they fell down. And of course, when things fall down, all roads lead to insurance. Insurance is a heavily data-driven industry, so therefore that was a natural synergy. I really got hooked with the whole data agenda, really, including location analytics. And that, of course, took me into the world of data and analytics, and eventually to IBM. I left IBM in 2016, really to pursue a non-corporate career. And that's really embraced a bit of writing, a bit of mentoring, a bit of consultancy, but it also gave me a little space to travel and also to do my own thing. So I guess really, that traveling also allows me to be quite open-minded in terms of what's happening globally. It really broadens the whole mind, and I'm just having a wonderful time.
Good, that's fantastic. And you've done three books. I think it's more than three, but you've had 3 books published, isn't it?
Yes, back in 2016, or in fact 2015, I was invited to write about analytics for the insurance industry, and not only did it prove to be quite successful, but I also enjoyed writing the book. The publishers Wiley invited me to write another one, which we'll be talking about today, really about the future of work, which was a more generic book rather than necessarily focusing on one particular industry. The book talked about the impact of AI and analytics on all industries and on all professions, and we'll get into that in a few moments. A couple of years ago, I was asked to write about the future of banking, which kind of wrapped into the whole financial services agenda. And I've got one on the go at the moment, which will be brought to market in 2022. And that's occupying a lot of my time as well. So I enjoy writing, but people obviously enjoy reading it as well.
And Alistair, who's he says he's a bit of a geek. He is a bit of a geek. So he's in the middle of reading my first book, but don't let that. That's not this.
Well, I mean, you very kindly, Tim, introduced me as not being a data geek, and although I've very much been absorbed in this whole data agenda and analytics agenda, my coding was left behind many years ago. It was originally done on Fortran with an elastic band, holding the punch cards together. But my particular point of view really is that the whole data and analytics agenda is far too important to be left to technologists, but rather because it affects everybody and affects all professions and all industries, if effectively we are all stakeholders, and
Yes.
therefore we are entitled not only to know what's going on in words which don't comprise jargon, but rather that we're entitled also to a point of view as to whether we like it and whether we are unhappy with it, and effectively to mould the future in a way that we want it to look, rather than become victims of that future.
There's a hashtag, tech for good, which is certainly on Twitter. I know it's on LinkedIn, which is another something as a really good data source to read, where people are seeing technology, artificial intelligence, machine learning, etc., all of those things where it's being used for the good of mankind. There's a kind of a collection point for that, which is I usually find is really interesting.
Yeah, but there's an awful lot of hype also around the topic. This particular session is really around the whole agenda of AI, but actually, with so much hype, people are applying the expression AI to what the purists would describe as nothing more than advanced analytics. And of course, you think in terms of AI being really at the current end of the maturity curve. Obviously, the curve starts with business intelligence or BI, moves on to predictive analytics, then prescriptive, rule-based. Then you start moving into cognitive and AI as a topic. And then, of course, within the subject of AI, you talk in terms of hard AI or soft AI. So, there are multiple elements to this. And many organizations which claim to have AI-based solutions, in reality, are just using advanced analytics. Netflix, retail, etc., are principally analytically based organizations, not AI-based.
Yeah. So what for those watching who aren't a data geek or anything, what's your definition of artificial intelligence?
Well, it's really not my definition, but artificial intelligence really is something which satisfies the Turing test, and the Turing test has been out quite a while, based on Alan Turing, who goes back to Bletchley Park and nearly 100 years of thinking, really. But it's really when we interact with a system without actually knowing whether that system is human or not. The reality is, already we are using advanced forms of intelligence for, many decisions which we have humans to convey to us. For example, if you make investments or whatever, invariably there will be intelligent systems sitting behind the scenes, which are suggesting what is the best investment option for you. But actually, we seem to be a little reluctant to accept that advice from a machine. We really need to have a human sitting in between the machine and ourselves to convey that advice in human terms. Of course, if you're sat in the car, you're more than comfortable to take advice from your sat nav. You have the choice of accepting it or not, but invariably we tend to. So, there are some interesting cultural behavioral shifts, really, around how do we feel in terms of accepting advice from a system without human intervention. But if you start taking it to a further level, how would we feel as employees to be taking instruction from a robotic manager? That's an interesting one. I'm not entirely sure we're there yet, but many managers, of course, already use advanced analytics to measure performance of their staff, and again are no more than the intermediaries between the employee and the system. So that's kind of a really kind of roundabout way of talking about it.
I think there's a number of things on our phones, aren't there, where I've got an Apple, and it's starting to suggest certain things based on previous, whether you set alarms or and it's going, do you want to set an alarm because you've actually set alarms at this time in the past and things like that. So there's those sort of suggestions going on.
But it's no different to suggesting what to buy your wife or your girlfriend for Christmas. Those are predictive issues rather than AI. And yes, of course, when we start looking at the wider AI agenda, we think in terms of AI comprising a number of functionalities, maybe facial recognition, palm recognition. But those in themselves aren't actually AI. They are simply components of a wider AI solution. So if we wind the clock forward maybe a couple of decades, we will see all those things coming together into a unified sort of solution, and we will interact with that unified solution in a much more informed sort of way. I guess also how we behave relative to that integrated solution will be influenced by the way in which the solution relates to us. The idea, for example, of a police service, as currently happens, looking at facial recognition and identifying whether a person is being honest or not through their voice or through their facial changes or whatever. It leads you almost to the point of a system being able to recognize what the advice the system is giving is having on you, and to modify that that advice accordingly. And of course, if you look at the education system, one might say that teachers have been doing that for years. They look at their student and they know exactly what their student is doing, and they modify the teaching method to suit. And as we move forward into a world of smart education, where education and teaching and training is done online, which is customized rather than teaching by rote, and the system is more than capable of identifying how the student is reacting to that training, and how quickly they're learning, how often they're going back over old text, and therefore start modifying the method of teaching entirely. So that's smart. That's advanced. Is it AI? Well, it's just a matter of definition, really.
And so how can one prepare for artificial intelligence? We keep saying it, people keep saying to us it's here or it's coming or whatever. What is it that we can do?
Well, I think the reality is that we have to recognize that the AI genie is well and truly out of the bottle. So therefore we're not going to be able to put this thing back in the bottle, and it will move at a pace which will either be much quicker or much slower than we imagine. But it will happen. And it will affect almost every industry and almost every profession. There are some professions, of course, where it won't affect. For example, the highly creative professions, or the professions which are at the other end of the spectrum. But there's a view that if a job can be automated, then the reality is it's unlikely to exist for very much longer, and it becomes a question of time then. So from a personal point of view, we need to recognize that. We need to recognize that the job that you are in at the moment is likely to be affected sooner or later. But if you're of a certain age, like I am, you need also to recognize that the services we receive, our pension arrangements, our medical treatment or whatever, will also be infused with AI. And therefore, we will be involved in the AI story, either as a professional or as a recipient. So that leads you to what additional skills you need going forward. And for me, the skills aren't necessarily technical skills, but rather behavioral skills. The ability to be agile, to be flexible, to be open-minded, to work as a team member, even if one of the members of the team is a system or a robot. And these aren't things which aren't readily taught. They can be taught, but it is a move away from the traditional thinking. I was talking to a group of university lecturers, and they said that their problem is that the way that university degrees are taught nowadays is very much in a traditional way, with an AI or analytics module bolted on. But the reality is that AI will be at the heart of everything we do going forward. And therefore, university degrees need to be taught in a way which is more suited to 2050 than 1950.
Yeah.
So, it is around recognition of change. It's around being able to participate in the debate. It's around being bold enough to have a point of view and express it.
I think that's very true. Alistair says, do you think, Tony, with AI, that more data is needed, and we will get to the point where AI is actually learning, not just processing?
I think invariably. I think the challenge, particularly though, is that there is too much data. We are swamped in data, and the data is either structured, held in warehouses, or it's unstructured, coming in through media, coming in through visuals, voice, many different ways. And we actually need systems to be able to sort out the wheat from the chaff, to be able to figure out what data is important or not. But the reality is that, as humans, we are always making judgments based on incomplete knowledge anyway. We get what knowledge we can, what information we can, and then we apply judgment to that. And the machine learning process really is a way of applying judgment, sometimes to incomplete data sets.
So if we want to get more information about AI, how do we do that? How do we jump on the AI train?
Okay, well, I guess really, without being marketing orientated, there's a very good book out there which I can happily recommend to you. But there is such a lot of information. But if you just want to drop me a line, either on Twitter or an email, I can point you to some very good websites. But the challenge really often is that there's so much information going around that it can become no more than an echo chamber. I think really, as individuals, we're all stakeholders. We all have an entitlement to be part of the game and to contribute. But we need to recognize where we are sitting in that particular situation. As an employer or an employee, what does this really mean for me as an individual? How can I learn more? How can I share ideas with like-minded people, or even people who disagree with what I think about? If you're part of a professional organization, does that professional organization have a view about the use of technology and AI? And if so, what is it? And are you contributing to it? If they don't have a view about the use of AI and data and analytics, well, as a member of a professional organization, create a view, offer a view, become a leader, not a follower. In the same way that there is, plenty of information out there, there's plenty of different viewpoints in terms of the use of analytics and data in multiple different industries, what it means.
And do you think that AI, because some people say that, as when the internet was introduced, there became all of these websites. Do you think that AI is going to basically become a part of our lives, just like the web is? Is it that sort of thing?
Well, I think we have to recognize that we are still on the AI journey. As we move into 5G telecommunications, where the systems will be quicker, the bandwidth will be improved, that will almost certainly result in even more devices being used in multiple different settings, in the home, in the factory, in the office. And those additional devices will create yet further data. So therefore, it will become an absolute data waterfall in terms of the amount of information becoming available. And therefore, invariably, we will need systems to help us sort through that abundance of information. So, 5G will transform things. Just around the corner is the whole concept of quantum computing, which again will be a game changer in terms.
So, what's quantum computing, Tony?
Well, that's a whole topic in its own right.
I realise that's a discussion in itself, but just a quick
definition. Imagine that in current computing, we operate a binary system. Effectively, the coding is based on ones and zeros, or more subtly, it may be based on positive and negative charges within the system. So traditional computing is based on, a 1 and a 0, or a binary approach. Think of that binary as being a coin, a head or a tail. Quantum computing is effectively spinning that coin and having heads and tails in existence simultaneously while the coin is spinning in the air.
Right.
So that is a real step change in the use of computing, and it will just move the game forward significantly. They talk in terms of the first proof points for quantum being available within 3 to 5 years.
Right.
So, when we think about the impact of AI on industries and professions going forward, by the time that many of us have actually got our heads around AI as a topic, quantum and 5G will already be with us, and we will be needing to reinvent ourselves yet again. And that's why the whole issue of agility and flexibility and competence and all those things become really key attributes going forward.
Yeah, I think that the flexibility, agility, and the openness, and the growth mindset are just key skills. I mean, we went out and bought, it was a number of years ago now, an Alexa, just purely to find out what it was about. And you said, you said, talking about being a part of the team. She's now part of our team.
Yeah, but many people are worried about devices like Alexa. On the one hand, we think about the whole technology agenda, but the other side of that particular coin is the issue of privacy and ethics, and the worry perhaps that algorithms, particularly in a black box, might have a bias, perhaps, which we might never see by virtue of the fact that they are in those black boxes. So therefore, if we are to go forward in an AI-infused environment, that requires us to be comfortable with that environment, and to be sure that all the necessary checks and balances are in place, including appropriate regulation, appropriate oversight. Because at the end of the day, if they're not, if we are using AI, for example, in benefits or immigration or areas where there are personal vulnerabilities, then the most vulnerable people will be excessively disadvantaged by biased algorithms. So AI and ethics become really critical just in the overall mix. It's not really just a technology story. It's around how we change this world of ours, but not become victims of it, but rather become effective stakeholders in the future.
Yeah. Tony, it's been fascinating. AI is something that's going to just it's accelerated and it just seems to get more and more, and I just find the whole subject really fascinating. So thank you for coming on and talking about it.
My pleasure.
So remind people where they can get hold of you. You've got a unique name. Search for that.
That is it. My name is Tony Boobier, or Boobier, depending on what part of the world you are calling me from. I'm contactable on LinkedIn. My email is tboobier@aol.com. You'll find me on Twitter. If you Google me, there are plenty of routes. You'll find my website. It's just impossible not to find me.
Fantastic. Tony, thank you so much for coming on and talk about artificial intelligence. It's been really interesting. And thank you for the Alistair, for tuning in, and for your Chakib for listening in as well, and all of the engagement. So thank you very much. And thank you, Tony.
Thank you very much too.
Thanks. Bye.